Right, welcome to another edition of the Paratrooper podcast. And today I am joined with former Paratrooper and Pathfinder, Tom Blakey. How you doing, Tom? All right?
All right, mate. Yeah. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on. I appreciate, as all the guests, taking a bit of time out to come and spend a bit of time chatting about bits and bobs. So happy days, pal. So what
Yeah,
I
no
like to
worries,
do,
mate. Thanks for
no dramas at all. What I like to do, very similar to a lot of podcasts, is like to get a bit of background about the guest, where they grew up, kind of what they were like as a school, their childhood and stuff, and then ultimately down the path that they took in joining the military, and in your case, the Parachute Regiment and the Pathfinders. So yeah, over to you, mate. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a place called Wellingborough in Northamptonshire. Nobody's ever heard of it. It's near Northampton, in the Midlands. And yeah, just had a fairly normal childhood growing up. You know, the usual shit, running around in the woods and flipping, just being a bit of a hoodlum around the local area. Um, Unusually for a Parage bloke, I actually did pretty well at school. I wasn't one of the
That's
ones
a
where,
first.
yeah, I wasn't one of the guys that joined the army because I had nothing better going for me. I actually did all right at school, but all I wanted to do was join the parachute regiment since I was about 7 years old. That was just my main focus. That's all I wanted to do. And I don't really know why, because I never met a paratrooper before I joined the army. But I think it may be to do with a lot of the sort of what we'd call media nowadays, things like comics, books that I was reading, and also films, things like, the Eagles Landed, like the German paratroopers
Oh
doing
yeah.
a bit, and obviously Bridge Too Far, and films like that where you see guys jumping out of planes, and I was like, that's what I want to do, and I wanted to be the best as well. So that was my kind of decision process. And also, by the time I was 10, the Falklands happened, and that kind of cemented things for me because the guys down in the Falklands, basically it was you'd either really it was the Marines and the parachute regiment that you heard a lot about and fought most of the battles down there. And I was more into wanting to jump out of airplanes and mess around in the water and surrender and stuff.
Yeah. No, you didn't want to be issued a white flag. Is that what it was?
No, basically no. So yeah, I joined the army
Oh,
when I was
that should.
16. Joined junior para. I couldn't wait any longer. I was absolutely desperate to join the army by the time I was 16. I'd been in the army cadets and I loved that too. Absolutely loved it. Joined the army when I was 16. And then, yeah, just 6 months down there because that's when it was the junior parachute company before it got amalgamated up to Harrogate. So it was known as the Hitler Youth because we was all
Right.
diehards, nothing to do with Nazism, but it was diehards, the guys that really wanted to do it, all their lives, and we're all like adamant we want to be paratroopers, and everything was super controlled there as well, more so than in depot. And yeah, went through depot, had a couple of injuries going through depot, got back squadded because I broke my leg on the parachute course, but other than that, yeah, cracked on through, and then I ended up in one para. That was my first unit I went to.
One para when they were at Aldershot North Camp or before that?
Before that, yeah. So we were in the old brigade lines in Montgomery lines in Aldershot, yeah, initially.
Right. So what year
Yeah.
was that then? 90,
1990, I passed out of training.
1990. Okay, cool. So yeah, you would have been literally, you'd have still been fresh Falklands, 8 years after the Falklands. So a lot of your instructors would have been guys that
Yeah,
were down south, wouldn't they?
exactly. Well, I joined up in '88 in junior para. So there were 6 years after the Falklands. So yeah, they were all of them, apart from the one para guys, were all Falklands veterans. So not all of them, but some of them were a bit screwed up in the head, and they didn't hold back then. There was no real rules; they just did what the hell they wanted in depot para, and there was a lot of hands on. They didn't kind of hold back whatsoever. But some great, awesome instructors. Obviously, they'd been there and done it. They'd fought the battles over there, and the one para blokes as well. They've been all the time in Northern Ireland and stuff like that. And yeah, awesome instructors, very, very professional.
Yeah, because I came through probably 7 years, 7, 8. I came through in 97. So, but there was still, sort of sergeants knocking around, colour sergeants that were, and certainly some of the sort of warrant officers and that were down south as well. So some of my
Yeah,
screws and head shed were ex Falklands and that. So yeah, I know what you mean, and I like to think even when I come through, there was still some hands on, but I think it kind of was getting a bit away from that, and I think they kind of did any of that nowadays. Probably. I mean, I'm sure the training is still as hard. Hopefully, it'll always be as hard as it always has been. But certainly, things would have changed when it comes to like beasting blokes and punching them in the face. It's kind of frowned upon, strangely. I don't know why. Weird, isn't it?
Well, when it was Depot Para, they had their own like bubble, didn't they? Well, we did. And basically everything stayed within that bubble. It wasn't like Catterick where things were visible to other people, and it's a lot more stringent on the rules. When it was Depot Para, they basically had their own train set and they did what they wanted. So it was very, very different. Yeah, it was good though. I mean, it's great.
Catterick,
it's a shame it changed.
Yeah, it's well, it obviously kind of like it did move up to Catterick, and I was having this conversation with, when I was speaking to Phil, and it was, I think it was about 92 or 93. I can't remember now. Someone commented on a post, said it was about 92, 93 that it moved to Catterick. And obviously we still had out like the Power side, but then on the other side of the bridge and under the bridge onto Vimy, we were on Helly's barracks, and then Vimy barracks was like a mix of different units and that. Yeah. And we used to do a lot of training on there. So it kind of was a bit mixed, which it is what it is. Class move on, don't they, and everything else. So obviously get to battalion 1990. What sort of tours then? Where did you go? Sort of 90? Did you straight out on a tour? Because you were still island heavy at that time, weren't you?
Yeah. So I had best part of a year in Aldershot where we did loads of good stuff. And my first ever Urban Forces Day was that year. And I got in the shit for that straight away. But anyway, lots of good stuff. Went to Kenya, went to where else did we go? All around the UK on exercises at Brecon, places like that. And then it was at the end of the year we did our build-up training for Northern Ireland. And we deployed to Northern Ireland in early 91, and we was over there for 2.5 years on the Palace tour. So
right, okay.
Just literally turned 19 that like a couple of weeks before I went to Ireland, and then straight over there for 2.5 years.
Wow, them tours had finished by the time I got in. You know, you still did your 6-month tours, did a couple of Ocknacloy, East Tyrone, and then Besbrook. But the 2-year Palace ones are kind of phased out, as it were, by then.
Yeah. So the brigade did a rotation, or the battalions did a rotation. 3 para did it. Then 1 para went followed them, and then 2 para followed them. And so back when I was there in the brigade, you had always 1 battalion was in Northern Ireland for 2.5 years. And then when we finished that rotation, what happened is 3 para then went down to Dover on that rotation down there. So it's funny because a lot of the guys now are like, oh yeah, 1 para, they're not part of the brigade and all that sort of stuff. But I remember it when 3 para wasn't part of the brigade, because they were in Dover, and then it changed to 1 para going to Dover. And also when we had the Northern Ireland rotation, each battalion was out of the brigade for 2.5 years. So it's not always been the way it is, and a lot of the younger lads won't realise that now.
Yeah, it rotates, like you say, it's always rotated through different bits and bobs and everything else. And it's like you say, all it is now is like 1 para kind of SFSG and sort of out of it. And there was talk, I mean, you might know more than I do, there was talk of maybe training up and like rotating him through that role. I don't know if that was ever going to materialise.
No, I've never heard of that, but it wouldn't surprise me if something changed. I'm surprised that SFSG has retained their own cap badges still. I heard at one point that they were looking to amalgamate it all into one cap badge, a bit like what the Rangers have done. But all the guys within that group have all retained their own cap badge, which is, I think, is quite unusual, really. But yeah, who knows what the future might hold for those guys. But obviously they're doing a really good job. Very interesting. I think there's quite a bit of jealousy from 2 and 3 para initially, because they were just getting slated when you're not really reg anymore, and you're not in the brigade and all that sort of thing. But actually they were getting out on operations constantly. So I think it was a little bit of jealousy more than anything.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, because I have sort of spoke to quite a lot of SFSG guys. I've got a few close mates that are SFSG, and they've done some really, really good sort of trips away with Hereford and that, and some interesting stuff. Because I think it started out as they were meant to be like support, and the idea was a little bit like staggering on kind of like compounds and stuff. But they're actually kind of been really supporting Hereford. I think that I went to Sierra Leone before the 1 para incident, when 1 para went, but then they were missing a company So
Yeah.
D Company ended up getting drafted in, and I went across, and then we come back, and then there was the whole incident with Hereford, and then one para kind of supporting him, and I think that's what then led on, didn't it, to
Yeah,
SFSK?
it is pretty much. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, okay, how long was you in one para before you decided, right, I'm going to take the leap and do something a little bit different?
So I was there for 5.5 years. Really enjoyed my time there. I was in patrols as well, so I went to patrols for 2 years, and that was kind of like a little bit of a step up from being in a rifle company. We had a very good platoon at the time. We did basically we did the whole of the PF course apart from the hills section, and then we went and did combat survival as well and the resistance to interrogation. So the guys were really, really well trained in patrols. And as a result of working with the Pathfinders, I thought, yeah, I fancy a bit of that now. And yeah, went on the Pathfinder selection in October 95.
So, for the kind of viewers and the followers that are not military and not familiar, patrols, explain what patrols are when it comes to battalion. Because you've got your different companies in battalion, you know, your rifle companies, your support company, patrols being.
Yeah, so the patrols basically, it's a bit of a historical thing from Parachute Regiment. Instead of calling them recce, like they do in other battalions, they call them patrols, and it's a reconnaissance unit for the battalion. So the idea being, it's just they just operate to the battalion, so they go out and set up things like observation posts or carry out reconnaissance for information for the battalion when they're going on operations. Um, Really, really interesting role, but you're restricted by fairly short range reconnaissance because you're going to operate direct back to your battalion.
Yeah, and the kind of certainly within two para, and I'm sure with all the battalions, there's like a little selection process for patrols, isn't there? The patrols
Oh,
cadre.
yeah, yeah. Where we did ours down in Sennybridge in January in '94, and it was horrendous. We got absolutely smashed. The Pathfinders actually ran the whole course, and there was a guy heading it up from one para who was ex-Hereford, and he'd allegedly got booted out of Hereford because he'd lost his marbles. He was like he was on medication, and he was heading the thing up, and he was like really good guy, but like Jekyll and Hyde. One day he'd turn up and he was dead smart and like not smart, but dead all right with you. And the next day he'd turn up and he'd lose his shit with you over something really, minor. And it was a bit like being back in depot, to be honest. And then you had the Pathfinders there that were thrashing us as well. 4 weeks in Brecon in Sennybridge. And then we went, like I say, went and did bloody combat survival, went on the run for a week. And then interrogation at the end of that for 36 hours, like full on, same as, Hereford type interrogation and stuff. And that was just to join the patrols, that.
Wowzers! So I suppose that put you in good stead. I suppose that it
Yeah.
give you a little bit of a heads up what was coming when you decided to take that leap and go down the Pathfinder route. So
Yeah.
you've been in 5.5 years. You've been in patrols. You've decided to go on PF or Pathfinder selection again because I just wanted to, as I said to you before we started, a lot's heard about 2-2 now, Hereford, the SES, SBS. Through recent years, everything that's come on, obviously Billy Billingham and the few TV shows, it's kind of highlighted what the SES and the SBS do, but still, you don't hear a lot about Pathfinders, and they're a really small kind of unit, but they do some really really good stuff, and they're a very tough unit. So yeah, just shed a bit of light on the role of the Pathfinders and kind of what the selection entails, if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, okay. So obviously I can't talk about everything, but what I can, I will do. So the selection course is 6 weeks down in Sennybridge. It starts off with an absolute thrashing. It's basically the first week you're getting loads of physical tests, plus you're getting other tests. So you get tested on your map reading, you get tested on your weapon handling, all different types of weapons, that sort of thing. Um, Anyway, yeah, so you get through the first week. That what they do at the end of that first week is they get rid of guys that basically haven't been meeting the times for the physical tests, and then after that, you then go and do a hills week. So you go out on the hills for I think 4 days, if I remember right, with a group. And what you do is within that group, you rotate through who's navigating and setting a pace, and you go as a group around the Brecon Beacons to different checkpoints and stuff. And that's just a warm up, and then you go on to the test week, which is 4 days. It's the same as Hereford, but instead of being a week, it's 4 days. But all the routes are the same, all the weights are the same, distances, all that stuff. So that's obviously very tough because you're out on your own and navigating yourself and self-motivating yourself over the hills. There's a bit of a difference though, because not slating anyone or not. I'm not trying to compare, who's harder or anything like that. But the PF Carder, in some ways, is a little bit harder on that part. I mean, there's only 4 test tabs, but when you're out on the hills at this stage, there might only be 10, 15 guys left on the course. So it's when you're split between different routes, that equates to not many people on your route. And it's not like you're following a big trail of Bergen markers up and down hills like what you get on SF selection, where you've got hundreds of guys on the hills. So again, not saying it's hard or anything, but I'm saying it can be very different, and it can actually test your navigation a little bit more when it's just you and and your map and your compass, as opposed to just following the crowd.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do that, you get through that. The last tab is always endurance, which is an absolute man's test. It's 40 miles self-navigating again. And I think if I remember right, it was £65 plus water, plus food, plus your weapon. So you're carrying like 80 to 85 pound on your back. And by this stage, your body's totally trashed as well. So it's all down to just having that mindset of keeping going, but staying switched on, being able to navigate and stuff like that. So you finish that, then you go on to an SOP week where you're learning all your standard operating procedure stuff, so your patrol skills, how to set up OPs, medical training, communications training using HF comms and stuff like that. You then do an OP phase where you do a mini exercise where you're out in an OP for a few days. And by the time we got to this stage, it was November and it was freaking freezing. I mean, proper cold.
Nice.
And you're on hard routine, which means you can't cook anything. So there's no hot brews, there's no hot food. You're literally just drinking the food out of the bag. Sorry, eating the food out of the bags and drinking water out of your water bottles, and that's it. And it's funny because you sometimes get guys that get through the hill phase, no problem, because they're uber fit. And then when they get to this phase, they just fold. They just go, this is not for me, because it's a different kind of test. It's a test of your patience and your discipline. It's really tough. Just laying there in the freezing cold, it could be raining and snowing and that. Anyway, the OP phase is done. You do that. Then you go into a live firing phase where you're out on the ranges for a week. And during our course, we tabbed out to the range every other day as well. So I think they took the tabs out of the card. I know they did for a while. I think they still have. But yeah, we tabbed out to the ranges, out onto the Sennybridge ranges as well during that week. And that wasn't nice because your body's wrecked at this stage. Your knees are, knackered and all that. And then that's just the start of the day, and then straight into live firing, so contact drills, section attacks, using different weapons, also demolitions, that sort of stuff. And then at the end of all this, you then go on a final exercise, which is, I think it was about 10 days. It's quite a long one. And you do a long insertion tab to start with, over 2 days. And then you get a patrol task, and it's normally an OP, an observation post. Again, observing a target, then you do a close target recce, and then you culminate with a platoon task where the couple of patrols, that whoever's left on the course anyway, you come together, do a task such as a raid or an ambush or whatever, and then obviously at the end of it, you get bugged out as well. It's never going to be right. Yeah, you've achieved your aim. That's it. Well done. You get
Love
to
a bug out. Love a bug out.
you finish that, and they're like, oh yeah, the enemy's coming in strength. You've all got to get back to the war RV, and you're tabbing at Mach 10, and you've been on the flipping go for 6 weeks, so your body's wrecked. So a very, very hard course. And then as soon as you've finished the course, as soon as there's a slot on the next SEER course, then you go on that as well. So SEER being survival, evasion, resistance, and extraction, where you learn all your combat survival techniques, and then you go on the run for a week, and then you get interrogated. The same as what I did in one para, but then I did it all over again for the Pathfinders.
Bonus. Couldn't get enough of it, clearly, could you?
Yeah. Well, I actually had to do it a third time later down the line as well, just for the added bonus.
Just for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
Why not, eh?
Just to treat myself.
So, yeah, treat yourself. Why not? So obviously, yeah, you kind of, once you finish that, you then go on and then you do your kind of parachuting, like, because in obviously you do your basic parachute course when you join in the parachute. However, I have heard they go into battalion now minus the wings, and they do the bit jumping when they get to battalion because of funding or cutbacks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you obviously go on and do your kind of free fall kind of military side of things. So explain that side of things, because I've always kind of liked that. I think it's alley as you like, watching blokes jump out of planes that height with oxygen masks and everything else. So.
Well, I when I was a youngster, I had a little book, and it was called Uniforms of the Elite Forces. And in this book, it had all the different units from all around the world. So it had like the Spetsnaz in there, it had GSG-9, it had the SAS, it had the Royal Marine Commandos, it had Parareg. And my favourite picture in this book was a picture of an SAS guy in full Halo gear. And from a very early age, that was like an ambition of mine. I'd always wanted to do it. And when I got on that course, it was like all my Christmases come at once. I was like, this is freaking amazing. I'm actually getting paid to jump out of a C-130 out off the tailgate. And, you know, as you progress through the course, you then do it with oxygen on and weapons and a massive rucksack and up to 25,000 feet at night with no lights or anything like that. And it's all just pitch black in the middle of the night. Freaking amazing. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'd previously done a free fall course because I was so keen on wanting to jump out of planes, even in my own time anyway. When I was in one para, a group of us went out to North Carolina near Fort Bragg and did a AFF accelerated free fall course to learn to civvy skydive. But then
Yep.
about a year later, you know, about a year and a half later, I went on my military free fall course and it was just, yeah, it was a dogs. It was amazing. Loved it.
Yeah, I know. I bet I never liked military jumping, as in like the basic, not the basic, but you know what I mean, the kind of static line kind of, because you know yourself, it's the low level, it's the hot, horrible, fucking all over the place, usually chaos. So I never had a problem with it as such, but I wasn't a massive fan. I've done a tandem free fall, but I wasn't that. I always find the guys that jump out of planes and find it like fun and hobbies is a bit odd. So you fall into that bracket, Tom. So,
Yeah,
but as
yeah.
far as that book goes, did that book have that you're on about have like someone cammed up on the front and it went through all the different units? I think I had the similar sort of book, and I know the picture you're on about with the PF or the S. They were all like oxygen masked up because I had that book as well when I was a young one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously you kind of once you've done your free is your free fall course part of the actual course, or is that once you get to Pathfinders there?
No, it's once you get there because they run the course. Well, I don't know what they do now, but they used to run the course 3 times a year. There was only 3 courses, and on each course you had a certain number of slots for Hereford, certain number of slots for Pathfinders, and a certain number of slots for the SBS. And it was only 3 courses a year, so you had to wait until there was a slot available before you could get on the course. So it's quite, you know, it was quite a prestigious course to be able to get on.
Yeah, awesome stuff. And how long is that course? It's like a couple of, but I bet I assume it's a few weeks.
I think if I remember right, it was 4 weeks, and it's in California.
Yeah. Oh well, bonus as well. That's all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. We used to do our sort of build-up training, our ground training and stuff in the UK, and they kind of try and get us doing a couple of jumps before we left in Bryce Norton onto a Western on the green. But yeah, the majority of the jumps were out in the States, and it was a great course. Sadly, though, there was a guy killed on my course parachuting. It was an RAF guy. He was a trainee PGI, and there was a problem with the equipment, and he basically went into the ground at Mach 10, you know, terminal velocity, and yeah, sadly was killed on the course.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of even like any sort of parachuting, there's a lot of risks there, isn't there? So it's kind of it's inevitable that at some point you're going to have dramas, whether you know it's death or whether it's injury. We probably both know lots and lots of guys, even from the static line stuff, that have broke ankles, legs, and
Well,
from jumping in high winds. Or
yeah, I've done both my legs parachuting.
well, that will square you right away as well, pal. And you still do it, don't you? So
Yeah.
you just can't help yourself, can you?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so you kind of the role of Pathfinder has probably changed. Well, you tell me it's probably changed a bit over the years because what was the original role of Pathfinder was well, what was it when
Well, so Pathfinders dates back to the Second World War, and they basically had 2 companies, 21st Independent, 22nd Independent companies. And they were assigned to each of the divisions. So the First Airborne Division, Sixth Airborne Division, and the Pathfinder's main role was to jump in ahead of the main assault, um, make sure that the DZs, the drop zones, were recce'd, secured, marked, and defended for the rest of the division to jump in on. That was their main role. Once the rest of the division landed, they were then retasked with other sort of recce tasks or defensive tasks for stuff like that. Um, However, it kind of over the years it's evolved. The Pathfinders as we know it now has only been in existence since 1985, so it's relatively new. And so just after the Falklands, like you know, it was a big shake up of the brigade after the Falklands. They changed P Company, you know, that sort of thing, and the Pathfinders were renewed again. Um, and basically nowadays it has more of a varied role than it did back then, but they still have that DZ marking role and also HLS marking. Obviously, what you do first is you go on the ground before everyone else. So normally a week before everyone else deploys, you jump in, halo or hey ho, or by helicopter. You then recce the area. You'll have tasks, reconnaissance tasks that might be specific to the mission. So finding out where the enemy are, looking for routes, that sort of thing. But you could be also recceing and defending and marking HLSs or drop zones. So that's still in existence. The other thing the Pathfinders get used for is just basically ground truth, finding out what's going on in a region, talking to the locals, maybe helping influence things on the ground, training foreign military, that sort of thing. But also strike tasks and ambushes and forward air controlling. So using aerial assets to take out targets of value, that sort of thing. So basically very, very similar to Special Forces, but without the Special Forces title.
Yeah, very, very varied role. And if I'm wrong, for a long time, it was only kind of if you was in the parachute battalions that you could apply for Pathfinder, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that was only a few years. So 1985, it was all parachute regiment, every single person. It was only a couple of years after that they started taking in engineers and signalers because of their specific skills for the trades that they've got from within the brigade. And then a few years later, they opened up to the rest of the brigade, so you could join from any cap badge within 5 Airborne Brigade as it was then. And then a few years later after that, they then opened it up to pretty much the rest of the army, and now it's tri-service.
Right. Okay. And do you get a lot of people again? Because obviously, unless you're in, I suppose military circles do hear about it. But I've met so many like Royal Marines along the way that have kind of like, oh, I don't really know what it does, and that's people that are serving in the military. So it's like, do you get a lot of sort of people from outside of 5 Airborne having a go then?
Yeah. So when I was there wasn't many. There was only a couple. I joined in 95 and there was only a couple. There was one guy that came in from what do they call them now? We used to call it was the Alphabet Regiment. It was the Gloucester's, Berkshire and Wiltshire Regiment. He came from that. And his nickname was
Or
Super.
GBGW or whatever it's
Yeah.
called.
His nickname was Super Hat. Because he was a great soldier, you know, he's really fit, great soldier. And guess what? He went on to Hereford. He passed selection. Um,
Yeah.
and then we had another guy that was a commando trained engineer. Obviously, he'd done his
Yep.
commando course, so he's a fit bloke and very professional. But there wasn't many. But nowadays, Pathfinders are much better well known, but much better known. And there's guys coming from all over the army. There's been a couple of Marines actually passed the course now, and there's been a couple of RAF Reg as well.
Oh, happy days. So it's good. I suppose it's always a good thing because you get a varying kind of level of sort of people from all over. It's never a bad thing, is it?
No, and it's always good to have ammo on people and slag them off easier, isn't it, when they come from places like RAF Reg?
Oh, without a doubt, mate. You got to give them shit, haven't you? You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
know a few RAF Reg lads as well, and you got to give them a bit of crap. It's all part of it. It's all part of the fun.
it is, mate. It is.
Yeah. So yeah, you've turned up. Where were PF based then back then when you joined?
So when I first joined, it was in Montgomery Lines in Aldershot, in the old barracks that have now been decimated. So I was there
Yeah.
for 4 years. I went to the Red Devils. I was in the Red Devils parachute team after that. And then when I came back to the Pathfinders in 2003, they're actually based up in Watersham in Suffolk. And then not long after I got
That's
there,
it. Yeah.
yeah, not long after we was at Watersham after I rejoined them. After we come back from Iraq, we then went to Colchester, and that's where they are now.
Yeah, there's that super. I mean, the barracks I was at, because I was in shop for probably about 2 years, and then we all moved to Colchester. And even the barracks that I initially went to in Miani Barracks in
Yeah.
Colchester, that's not there anymore. That's a housing estate.
Yeah,
But they built like a super, I say just built, it's probably about 10-year-old now, isn't it? Super block that houses pretty much the whole of sort of the brigade, doesn't it?
yeah. Yeah, PF got their own.
So
They've got
you've
their own
got,
compound within that, and it's pretty decent to be fair. It's like self-contained with its own armory, its own gym. It's got like classrooms in there, its own MT section, all within a compound. And the good thing about it is it's kind of tucked out the way, so you don't get like RSM strolling past, going, do you put your berry on and stuff like that.
yeah, hidden out the way of the head shed, mate. It's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so with the first part, 95, you've gone to Pathfinders. What sort of stuff was you up to then? What sort of ops was it? Because 95, there probably wasn't a massive amount going on, was there?
No, so we didn't go to Northern Ireland as Pathfinders, so we didn't have that within our operational role. Um, and the first time I went on operations with Pathfinders was to Kosovo in '99, actually. Um,
Yeah.
so that was obviously, it's not so much of a war fighting tour; it's more of a peacekeeping or a war prevention thing, really. Stopping the factions from killing each other, and basically we were setting up OPs up on the hills and observing routes and that sort of thing. And again, we're doing that thing where we a bit like the American Special Forces do, where you're going into villages, you're talking to the locals, you're kind of befriending people, you're using some more of a soft touch, and kind of talking to people to find out what's going on and what's been happening to the villages, because there was villages with unexploded ordnance like stuck in the sides of walls and all sorts of things, and we'd be finding out things like where mass graves were and reporting it up the chain of command, all sorts of things like that. And whilst I was on that tour, I was in the same section, well, same team, should I say, as Brian Budd, actually, as it goes.
All right. Okay. Yeah. And for the viewers at home, Brian Budd received the VC. He was killed in Helmala province. Was it 2000 and
Six,
2007?
2006.
2006. Was he kind of with three para on that
He
2006 tour?
was, yeah, he was, yeah.
Yeah. I've read kind of bits of snippets about what he did on that, and it's absolutely incredible. And obviously, that tour that three para on, that was one of the reasons. I was out by then on the surface working in Iraq, but I was on holiday and I read that book I read it in about 2007 about the three para tour, and that's what made me go I went for FTRS briefly
Yeah,
to join up to two para to then go on the 2008 tour of Afghan. But advised when I were there, I got offered a job on convoys in Iraq, and it were $135,000 a
yeah,
year, and I was a bit like, well, I want to go to Afghan, but I also want money. So I spoke to a Power Rangers captain. He went, honestly, mate, if I were you, I'd do one and do that. And I was like, that's all I needed to know, and off I went. So
yeah,
yeah,
well,
the 2006 tour for Free Power was a particularly hardcore tour, wasn't it?
it was, yeah. So we was on that too. And that was the
All
first
right,
big,
okay.
yeah, that was the first big dust up tour, 2006, because the only thing that really happened before that was the two para deployment to Kabul, wasn't it? Which was, pretty much just, it was fairly sort of peacekeeping orientated kind of tour. Whereas the 2006, we knew we were going into a hornet's nest, and it was a massive kickoff. Yeah, I mean, there's no messing around on that one. Yeah, we got involved in lots of hairy stuff during that tour.
Yeah, that was carved by a local in Kabul. That one.
Oh, right. Nice.
um, but yeah, I mean, I've spoken about that one again before, and it was exciting, but there wasn't a lot going off. I've been quite open about it. There was a lot of potential on that tour, but it just never really materialized. I think our patrols and snipers had a bit of a skirmish from the palace,
Yeah,
and there was a lot of standoffs at night time with the police, and because we were moving around and they didn't know who we were properly and everything else.
yeah,
But then it was subsequently, obviously, 2006, and I don't think people kind of really expected it to go quite quickly and turn like it did, and it kind of proper
yeah.
hit shit at the fan.
Yeah, it did. I remember I think there was a guy who was the defense secretary or something. It was like a famous quote was saying that I'll be surprised if they fire, many rounds in anger or something like that. And I remember hearing that and going, this guy's a freaking clown. We're going into the homeland of the Taliban here. who are, our enemy number one. And as if it's not going to kick off. So, the people that had read up a little bit on where we're going, it was a little bit more, I'd say, I'm not saying educated, but, aware of the situation. Yeah, I think I for one, I knew it was going to kick off when we got there. I knew it was. And I'm pretty sure most of the other guys did as well, to be fair, that were going.
So obviously, with it being a bit of a sensitive nature, obviously the role of Pathfinders and stuff, is there any sort of elements of it you can expand on that don't disclose too much?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we weren't really used in too much of a sensitive role out there, really. We were mainly used to plug gaps and stuff because 3 para got fixed really, really rapidly, really quickly, because they only had the rifle companies, they didn't have a brigade worth of troops. They had 1 battalion. And as soon as they got into a town, they got into a scrap, places like, where we ended up in one of the places. But the towns, basically, as soon as they kicked off, it got fixed there because they had to stay and defend the district centre. And then we ended up doing the same thing, exactly the same. We went into a place called Musicala, and we were there we was only meant to be there for like 2 or 3 days, and we ended up being there 2 months. So, it was pretty savage, pretty severe. We was getting hit just about every day, and most days more than once as well. So we were very, very, very lucky not to have anyone killed during that 2 months there. I don't know how we managed it, but we did. The day that we got relieved in place, there was a guy killed. And the guys that took over from us, the Royal Irish Company, they had quite a few killed in their sort of time in that area. So we were very lucky.
Yeah, again, I've read about it, and I spoke to. I worked with when I worked out in the Middle East. I spoke to a Marine who relieved sort of a for 3 para, and obviously there wasn't a lot being fed back, but he was briefed as he was flying in on a sort of with a load of other Romans because they relieved 3 para, didn't it? Was it 4, 5, or one of the commando units relieved 3 para, and he was like, we were briefed up. Look, you're going down these rounds. Fuck, it's a 2-way range. Expect, and he were like, yeah, I've heard this before. And he said he got on the ground and he's seen the lads from Para Edge and probably PF as well, and they were like, they had that proper. They looked absolutely the 1,000 yards stare they've been at. Because I read also there was like grenades being thrown over walls insane.
Yeah.
They were throwing back and close, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, mate. Yeah. Yeah. And it was one of those things where it's like as a paratrooper, it's the best time of your life because like this is mega, this is what I've always wanted to do. But at the same time, it's kind of the worst thing, especially if, any of your mates get the chop. Or anyone gets badly hurt, So it was a big mixture of things. But having that experience of bringing in like fast air, like A-10s doing strafing runs and bloody Harriers dropping bombs and we had a B-1 fly over so low it blocked the sun out. It was ridiculous and really low and really fast. It was amazing. So getting to see things like that, in real life, it was freaking amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how long did you spend out there with the Pathfinders before you sort of came back to the UK?
That was a 6 month tour, that one. And as you say, the Marines relieved us out there as the Marines Free Commander Brigade relieved us. And then, back to UK. And I did another 6 month tour later on, 2010 as well.
What was that one like? Not, I assume not as bad. I'm not going to say it quieting down because it's always, that place has always got potential. But obviously, I'm assuming that 2006 one was the biggie.
It was, but 2010 was also busy as well. We was out all the time and we were constantly, basically, we was using a different role. It was a bit of a pain in the backside. We was using what's called Brigade Reconnaissance Force role, which had evolved over the years to being like a company-sized group. So we had loads and loads of attachments of guys that weren't at the same quality. So that wasn't great. There's some good lads, but a lot of the guys we had with us weren't at the same quality that we'd got ourselves to. But it was still a good tour. We went out, pushed out we was doing a lot of sort of ground truth type stuff. So pushing out into areas to see if there's any Taliban or signs of the Taliban knocking around. And because we were doing that, we were getting into firefights just about every time we went out as well. So it was busy. But what we did find on that tour, 2010 to 11, is the rules of engagement were much tighter because it was, a few years down the line since that first tour. Obviously, the fun police come in and suck all the fun out of it, don't they? Yeah. So yeah, the rules of engagements were a lot tighter, and the only airstrike we had during that tour killed one of our own blokes. So they had a problem with the targeting pod on the aircraft, and my platoon got strafed by an F-18. So not ideal.
Wow. No, not really.
Yeah. So
Did
we have
that take any one casualty?
well, one killed and three injured.
Wow. Again, we talk about this all day about, unfortunately, blue on blues kind of things like that. They're a kind of, I wouldn't say common, they are a constant threat and also a constant reminder that it's a very thin line, isn't it, between what can go wrong very, very quickly. So
Yeah. Real sad day that. Really good guy killed, X3 power lad. And yeah, it was just, just a sad day. It was the only guy killed on that tour from BRF was killed by friendly fire. So like I say, it's the way it goes sometimes, but quite a sad
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. And it is a shit. And it's something I think even more kind of, sad about it is the fact that it was friendly fire. And again, I've talked about this loads of times as well. You kind of go out to places like that and you almost expect people to get injured or casualties or even killed by enemy fire because that is the nature of the role and the job you're
Yes,
prepared to
yeah.
do. And but when it's an accident, it's even more kind of, it's just a bit like shit because that it didn't necessarily have to happen, did it? But again, it's just fucking one of the things, but it's a shitter. And I bet it affects morale massively, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's just one of them things, you can kind of reason with it when it's an enemy action, but when it's friendly forces, it's like, yeah, it's kicking the nuts, eh?
Yeah, no, 100%, mate, 100%. So moving on from that, you've kind of 2000. So you've done the 2006 to 2010 tour. You've come back, and so at this point, sure, how many years have you been in at that point? So you've been in
Uh,
about 20 odd years, then, haven't you? So
yeah. So my 22-year point was, when was that? Because I joined at 16, your first year and a half doesn't count. So my 22-year point was 2012. So I come back from Afghan in 2011. I then got a job at Bryce Norton for a year. And then basically I was on Veng. I was on my 2-year extension after that. And I continued at Bryce for my last 2 years. So that was me done after that. I did join Four Power for a while afterwards. But yeah, that was the end of my sort of regular army career. I did 25 years all up, including my sort of junior service.
yeah, a good stint, pal. Good stint. Yeah, I did a little bit with Four Para for a little bit. It was kind of just to keep my hand in and kind of not for very long. I think I did about, I can't even remember. It wasn't very long. I think I ended up doing like 5 or 6 weekends spread over like a period of time. I remember going up and I've been out ages and I had to go up and do a P Company 10 miler with one of the recruit companies that were going through.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, yeah, I'll be able to play. I've done phys. I've always been doing fitness, but went up and did like a P Company 10 mile. And I was like, fuck it up. That was harder than I remember.
Yeah. So
But
I did about 3 years, I think, in Four Para. I was down at White City, and then whilst I was there, I was still skydiving. I was like still jumping down at Netheravon and doing tandems and all that sort of thing. And I actually got asked to go back on the Red Devils because I was on the Red Devils back in 2000 for 3 years. And then I got asked to go back on the Red Devils as a full-time reservist. And that's what I did in 2017. So I was the first ever reservist, like full-time reservist on the Red Devils. So that was pretty freaking amazing. That.
yeah, 100%. That's decent. And how long did you kind of stay with them then?
Well, my contract was for 2 years. However, at the end of my first year, I smashed myself into the ground and fucking snapped my femur into three
Ah,
pieces. So that was the end of my flipping time in the Red Devils, unfortunately. And I was intending to go back for Para, but I've never really fully got fixed from that incident. I've still got a pin going through my leg, and I can't really run very well. So, yeah, I've never gone back to for Para, and I think I know that's the end of my time in the Reg. apart from the fact that I'm not in the reg anymore, but I'm still wearing uniform because I work for cadets now.
Yeah, I was going to say that moving on, because again, I spoke to someone that's in the fire service that kind of recently went away with you on a sort of thing. He's in four barrel. About that, what's that about? And obviously, you clearly enjoy it.
Yeah, so what I did is after I kind of was able to walk again, I as a result of me being injured, what happened at the end of my FTRS time is I got sent to two para actually, as it goes, and I was there as the welfare officer for my last sort of 9 months on that contract. And whilst I was there, I don't know if do you know Jim Kilbride?
I do, don't you? Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got chatting to him there, and he was doing a job on a thing called the cadet training team. And I was like, what, is this a full-time job with the cadets? And he said, yeah, you're not in the cadets as such, you're on FTRS. But what you do is you advise and help train and guide the local cadet units for CCF, Combined Cadet Force. So I said, right, I'll give that a go next, I think, because I still can't run. So yeah, I went to that for a couple of years. And then as a result of being there, I found out about jobs within schools where you can be something called a school staff instructor. And that's what I'm doing now. It's a little bit like doing a job of maybe an RSM stroke clerk stroke colour man all mixed into one.
All right. Okay. And is that like how many days a week is that, or is it kind of ad hoc, or how does that kind of work?
It's a full-time job. It's a full-time job. And the weird thing is you wear uniform. So I'm still in, my Bavarian smock and all that, but I'm employed by the school. So you're closely connected with the cadet training team. So that's who you liaise with for all your admin and all that sort of stuff. But it's a full-time job employed by the school. So you do all the admin for the cadet unit. You help organise the training, and you're basically the sort of anchor point for everything within the cadets in that school, just for that one school.
Oh wow, I bet that's quite rewarding actually, because obviously you're these sort of kids and young teenagers' first touch with the military, and that will determine whether they kind of show an interest and ultimately go on and join the military themselves.
Yeah, exactly that. And one of the things that kind of made me think about it being an awesome job. I don't know if you know the guy, but Giles Timms, it used to be the CO4 para, and he was also the regimental colonel for a while. He went to the school where I work at now, and he joined the parachute regiment as a result of the SSI that when he was there being an ex two para soldier. So this guy influenced Giles into joining the parachute regiment, and he's gone on to do some mega things. He's MBE, he's got the military cross, did sort of 30 years parachute regiment, became the regimental colonel. And that was influenced by the guy when he was in cadets from the SSI there at the time. So I'm thinking, who knows, maybe some of these young generation guys that I'm working with now may go on to do some good things, and let's hopefully influence them into the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and not only that as well. Not everyone comes from a stable family. Not everyone has kind of uh, role models in their kind of lives. So you might be literally the first positive role model that they encounter in their lives potentially.
Yeah, who knows? And the other thing is, not everyone wants to be in the army or the parachute regiment, but within the cadets, they get to do lots of stuff they wouldn't normally do, especially nowadays with everything being techie and kids just sat on screens all the time. They get to do stuff that pushes them outside their comfort zone and actually develops their character. So they get to. I mean, last week we was on exercise for 3 days. Tomorrow we're doing Duke of Edinburgh weekend, so they're doing their exped for Duke of Edinburgh. A couple of months they're going on their annual camp, and there's loads of activities that they get involved with where they're doing new things. They're developing their character because they're having to. Some of them are leaders, so they're developing the leadership, the teamwork, the discipline. This is all stuff that doesn't really get kind of pushed much nowadays. And within the cadets, it's a really good way of actually developing the young people. So even if they're not joining the military, they're getting some really good sort of life skills out of it that they can use for, whatever else they might want to do in their lives.
No, absolutely, pal. Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. It's a good, even if it's not a stepping stone, like you say, for military. You're teaching them basic life skills which they may not be able to get
Yeah,
from other avenues. So yeah, no, absolutely brilliant, mate. That is.
yeah.
So what I want to kind of obviously that's what you're up to now. I want to touch on, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, but again, one of the main reasons I kind of started the podcast. One is that I get to talk to interested people like yourself that have done bits and bobs, and you know that's a biggie for myself, is to talking to people that I kind of admire and they've got interest in extraordinary stories. But another thing was kind of, because I'm sure we know kind of mutual people that have kind of sadly taken their own life, that have struggled with PTSD and mental health. I certainly have within various units, from working close protection from the parachute regiment to my current role now in the fire service. There's people, you know, that struggle with mental health. Is that anything you've had any dealings with? And if so, is it anything you could touch on? Obviously, you've been involved in a lot of stuff, a lot of kinetic stuff over the years.
Yeah, I mean,
How has that kind of affected you? Or are you one of the lucky people that it's not kind of affected?
I think personally, for me myself, I think I've been quite lucky that it hasn't really had too much of an effect on. I think everyone's going to have it's going to have a little bit of an effect on you in some ways, but I've not been down the road of being depressed or anything like that. To be honest, I think I've come out of it pretty well, but I do know people that have had some major issues. I even know a couple of guys that have taken their own lives. I think we all have, haven't we? The people that have been doing this sort of this thing, this at the sharp end. Sadly, that sort of thing is, it's gonna there's gonna be more and more of it as the years go on. I think there's no getting away from that, and it's a sad part of what we do. I think is, we're all human, and unfortunately, it can take its toll, can't it? But yeah, I have known a few people that have died as a result.
Yeah, well, it's come on a long way with kind of recognizing it now, and the support is slowly, getting there for people. And I'm very, very similar to you. I have had my moments throughout my life, but touch wood, I've kind of been very, very lucky with it. Uh, it's not really kind of affected me that much. So I'm not saying it, you never know what's around the corner. You never know what triggers you, what sets you off. But
Yeah,
like, I
exactly.
always encourage people to kind of pick up the phone. I'm sure you agree as well, mate, to pick up the phone. And I'm always available to chat to anyone that's got any dramas or point them in the right direction. I do a lot of dealings with a lad. His name's Sean McCallum. He kind of works for the fire service, and he's got a brilliant company. It's called Responder Resilience. He's one of the sponsors of the podcast, and he does like a crisis team, runs a crisis team. My fiance's been and done the crisis team course. She says absolutely just talking, encouraging people to talk about their issues and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think that sort of exposure, it can never get talked about enough, and hopefully it will gather more momentum, and kind of people will start talking more about it. So
Yeah, I think that's half the
that's
issue,
the plan.
especially as para edge. You tend to climb up, and it's seen as a weakness, isn't it? Talking about any issues you might have. I think that the key thing is to get it out in the open a little bit, and once you kind of do that, it kind of releases out your head a little bit, doesn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, I think what people happens is they blame it on leaving the military. Now you've got this support network around you within the military, your friends, the banter, which is massive. People giving you stick, giving you crap, and you know, to the outside world, they probably wouldn't understand these sort of professions because that's how people deal with stuff. Then suddenly you leave the military, or you get medically discharged, or whatever, and then all of a sudden you've not got that support network, because you're probably the same as me. I walked out them gates in 2004 thinking, oh, you know what? Few weeks time I'll be down here on the lash, and it was something like 10 years before I went down. Life moves on, and life gets in the way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I'm pretty good at keeping in touch with people, to be fair, and I do go to a lot of the get-togethers, not religiously, but I do get down to like airborne forces and stuff like that, and it's always good to catch up with people. Funny enough, I'm off to a funeral next week, as it goes. As one of the guys I served with in one para died of a stroke. He's only I think mid to late 50s. Died of a stroke about a week and a half ago.
Wow.
So that's up in Glasgow, and no doubt that'll be a good get together. I know a few of the guys are going ex Parage and ex Hereford and all that. So looking forward to, under sad circumstances, looking forward to catching up with a few people and just having a saying goodbye to an old mate, basically.
Yeah, it's always good. It's always good to get a good turnout, and 9 times out of 10, the guys they do get a good send off again because it's part of again people that don't know or have never been part of that brotherhood that is the parachute regiment. It's like you know you can call upon people that you've never even spoke to in years, and we'll be there to help you at the drop of a hat. No pun intended.
Yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, no, Tom, absolutely fucking brilliant chatting to you, mate. I'm great. I'm conscious of the time, but it's been brilliant. Hopefully, at some point, our paths will cross, and I'll
Yeah, mate.
catch up with you for a beer. You're not actually too far down the road from me. I'm only in Nottingham, so are you in like Wellingborough now?
Yeah, mate. I was in Nottingham yesterday.
Are you joking?
Yeah. Well, I was up at Chilwell Barracks. So I bumped into your hat mate on the gate, remember?
Yeah, of course you will. Of course you will. Look, if you end up at Chilwell Barracks again, sort of give me a shout, mate, and I'll grab a brew, beer,
Yeah.
whatever. I'd be love to have a chat with you and like meet you in person, mate. So,
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
but I'll have a quick chat with you. Yeah, Sam, mate. I'll have a quick chat with you in a minute. I'll stop the recording. We'll have a chat off air briefly. But look, it's been an absolute pleasure, pal. Thank you very much for making the time, and you have a cracking night. And I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah. Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me on.